You're really gonna remove my video, YouTube? I played by all your rules. I did everything you wanted. But now that I know the rules don't matter, I'm gonna do it again even harder. In the late 1960s, there was a revolution happening. A social revolution, where all the previous norms and restrictions of the repressed 1950s were being challenged for something new. Civil rights movements, feminist activism, anti-war protests, and the counterculture of the youth were reshaping the very fabric of American society. People were questioning authority, defying traditional values, and exploring new ways of thinking, living, and expressing themselves. It was a time of rebellion, experimentation, and upheaval, as the younger generation sought to break free from the rigid expectations of their parents' era. And this revolution would coincide with a similar one in American film. The old system of Hollywood was dying. Popular genres like musicals and historical epics, which once brought in much of their income, began to fail financially, leaving studios scrambling to find a new formula for success. Television had already stolen much of Hollywood's audience, and with audiences becoming younger and more disillusioned, the glossy, formulaic films of the past no longer resonated. Film studios were losing money, and there's one thing a business doesn't like, it's losing money. Major studios were forced to gamble on fresh voices, unconventional stories, and experimental styles to attract the emerging youth market. This desperation gave rise to a new generation of filmmakers who were eager to push boundaries, challenge censorship, and reflect the raw energy of the times. Directors like Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola embraced this opportunity, creating films that were more personal, daring, and socially relevant. It marked the beginning of so-called New Hollywood, a period where creativity flourished and the rigid rules of the past were cast aside. And this new filmmaking culture coincided with a new sexual revolution, giving rise to what we now call the Golden Age of Porn. According to Wikipedia, pornography is a sexual subject material, such as a picture, video, text, or am I really going to explain what porn is to the internet? Porn is a billion-dollar industry, and it's one of the largest and most profitable media industries in the world. But the transition from pre to post-porn world is a complicated one. Sure, erotic films existed since the inception of the medium, and of course there is the entire whole of human history behind that, but post-war America was an important site for adult films as a large-scale industrial project of reproducible images. There was money to be made here, but there were constraints under the law. And because Americans have never had any real freedom of speech, but like to pretend that they do, art that is considered obscene is not protected speech. That can be illegal. And much of it is. People went to jail for making obscene films. So to skirt around that, porn producers made films that could be more widely considered artistic. What distinguishes the obscene from the artistic? Nobody knows! If you can figure that out, there's a PhD in philosophy waiting for you. But the judicial system decided that, hey, they're gonna decide that based on their gut feeling. And if you disagree, well, sucks for you, we control the cops. If you want a post hole, you gotta get this guy to publish it right next to Fahrenheit 451, a real thing that actually happened. The consequence was that the only people that could really publish erotic art were the people who basically already had control over the rest of art, which is a very specific group. So now, we got a system where everybody is clamoring for porn and wanting to make a bunch of it, but we also gotta make it artistic or we're going to go to jail. The result is the golden age of porn, where artists are legally required to make quote-unquote art, whatever that means. But luckily for us, 50 years later, the resulting product ended up with a lot of really cool stuff. We got films like Night Dreams, which is a strange, abstract compilation of scenes that can range from the creepy to the absurd. We got Fritz the Cat, which expanded what people thought of the animated medium and gave a political narrative about the hypocrisy and racism built into the hippie movement. And we got science fiction dramas like Sex World, confronting the history of objectification and the paradox of wanting sexual recognition with the knowledge that you can really never know what's going on underneath the exterior. And it was in this culture of experimentation, creativity in the erotic arts, and sexual revolution that we got the worst porno ever made. Bat Pussy. That's it, montage is over. Because that's basically all of her that you're gonna get. In theory, this movie is about the titular Bat Pussy, a crime-fighting superhero who seeks out justice when her twat begins to twitch. But for most of the movie, you're gonna be watching these two randoms instead. Buddy and Sam. These names don't really matter though, because these characters don't matter. All these two ever seem to do in the movies argue with each other. About nothing.
You're always coming home late, and when you come home, you're
we've
tired.
Got to make some money, right? Huh?
Will you let me work? You won't let me go out and get a job.
Look. I don't want to talk about the work no more. I'm tired of you standing down there on the corner of Elm Street.
They just keep arguing in seemingly improvised ways, stumbling over lines, misspeaking, with some of the worst acting you would see in any film, porn or otherwise. They clearly have no understandings of their characters other than the fact that they're supposed to argue, so that's all they seem to do, even when they're having sex.
Darling, that's more fun, you know, that's the way to go.
Well, I told you it would be, but you wouldn't listen to me.
And oh my god, the sex. I really wish that I could show you this on YouTube because it is like nothing you have ever seen before. I hope. If you're feeling a little bit confused, don't worry, there is no context that you're missing. This is just how the film starts out. It's one of those classic bad movies, where you're presented with various scenarios without any understanding about what is causing them or what's happening. And this goes on for a while until we are suddenly interjected with...
Meanwhile, at Bat Pussy's secret warehouse hideout, Dora Dildo, alias the mighty Bat Pussy, is patiently waiting for her super senses to tell her that a crime is about to be committed.
After this, Bat Pussy dresses into her costume, we get some more quote-unquote sex, and then we're treated to this very long scene of Bat Pussy bouncing around on a ball, ostensibly to the crime scene. It's a scene that doesn't add anything to the plot, and we've already established that the plot doesn't matter here. They put so much work into all these shots of her bouncing on her ball, and it doesn't matter. This could easily be skipped, it's not important at all. But they kept it in anyway for some reason. And why is she bouncing on a ball? Who knows? I assume that one of these people had like a car or something. They obviously can't make a Batmobile or something, but she could just like drive to the next scene in just a normal car. The choice to use a ball instead makes no sense, and I love it. Anyway, she eventually stumbles into her couple and decides to have sex with them. You see, it's all coming together. True hyperlink cinema. There's this great moment where they're tumbling in bed and Bat Pussy falls off. Everyone breaks character for a second, and the guy playing Buddy just goes up to check on her. Luckily, everyone is alright. It makes for a really cute and funny interaction.
God! Oh, get out of here!
Hurt you?
Oh,
Huh?
God.
That hurt?
Fight me, buddy. Fight me.
Oh, shit. Fight the best, it hurt.
And then the audio just suddenly cuts out. But it's very funny that they had to screw up, and they decide to add it into the actual film. During this time, the actors will continue to break character and discuss things with the crew and director. It's a pretty massive break in the film's realism, or at least whatever semblance of realism the film had at that point. So that's essentially the gist of Bat Pussy, the worst porno ever made, but because I'm me, I'm going to complicate things just a little bit. That's right, we're going to academic porn studies. Because I seemingly can't talk about anything without relating it to scholarly research I've done. Once you go to graduate school, there's really no coming back from it. I'm tortured to be this way for the rest of my life. The seminal work in porn studies is Linda Williams' book Hardcore. This in-depth examination of the genre explores its history and cultural significance while offering a framework for analyzing erotic films. The book delves into how pornography operates as both a visual medium and as a cultural product, addressing its power dynamics, aesthetic structures, and the tensions between arousal and narrative. And before I get deeper into it, I want to mention that there are major issues with this book, both on a historical and theoretical level. Analysis focuses almost exclusively on heterosexual male auteurs and implies that it is only recently that outsiders have begun to create work in the genre, when in fact gay and female artists have been directing porn with smaller distribution networks for decades at that point. See Rachel Middleman's book Radical Eroticism. Hardcore also often universalizes viewer responses, implying a singular or homogeneous interpretation of porn, when it's much more likely that consumers will be decoding various unique messages in a lot of varied ways, reflecting both within and between group variation. Despite these limitations, the book nevertheless remains a foundational and important text in the field of porn studies. Williams was one of the first scholars to engage with adult films from a serious aesthetic perspective. And while she is far from celebratory, she recognizes the importance of the medium, along with all its problems, and provides a practical framework for understanding erotic films that is still used to this very day. One major observation that William makes is that the typical rules of filmmaking just do not matter in porn. Like, think about it. If you're watching an erotic film in its intended way, how often are you thinking about the quality of the dialogue? It just doesn't matter. Porn consumers and creators alike have largely accepted that the serious integration of a narrative is unimportant to the genre. Quality doesn't even factor into the equation, and yet the narrative continues to persist. Nobody cares about the plot in porn, but it's still there. As William writes, narratives that are already rudimentary become truly primitive during their hardcore sequences. Pornographic films seem to have mastered the narrative progression through cause and effect up until they arrive at the literal crisis and climax of their hardcore sequences. Yet, since crisis and climax and frenzies of movement are what the hardcore film is fundamentally about, and since the hardcore sequences occupy most of the screen time, we would do well to examine the primitive nature of these sequences more carefully. This is a common aspect of the genre. Bat Pussy is no exception. Despite the fact that plot doesn't matter in a porn film, Bat Pussy has become one of the most infamous So Bad It's Good films, alongside The Room and Manos the Hands of Fate. It may have all the hallmarks of a laughably bad movie, including poor acting, nonsensical plot, awkward dialogue, but these are all aspects that are common to porn. Yet, for some reason, it's rare that the rest of the genre is treated in the same way. So what does Bat Pussy do that is especially bad in comparison? Many people define a bad movie as something that fails to achieve the artist's intention, a movie that wants to do one thing but ends up doing another. This is a common narrative that surrounds the So Bad It's Good genre. Tommy Wiseau wanted to make a serious drama about relationships, but his poor writing turned it into something entirely different. And there is a certain joy that surrounds making fun of an artist's failure, but it's one that does not apply to Bat Pussy. Bat Pussy is the rare example of a film whose production is completely unknown. The movie contains no credits, and not a single person has stepped up to claim that they worked on it. In a social and historical sense, Bat Pussy has effectively no author. It was randomly found in the back of a video store closet with no context. There is nothing that we can definitively say about the artist's intention. All that we have is the text itself. And even that seems to imply that this was a low-budget affair involving amateur actors goofing around on set and improvising. It seems that the breaks in character reveal nothing more than a friendly kind of roleplay, rather than any specific artistic vision. The failure behind Bat Pussy must then lie elsewhere. Williams would later relate the primitive mode of cinema porn enables to what she calls body genres, defined by the spectacle of a body in the grip of intense sensation or emotion. The body genre is not defined by the constitutive elements of its narrative, as we might for robots and spaceships in sci-fi, or elves and orcs in fantasy, but instead on the emotions and sensations that the work is attempting to produce. And I hope I don't need to explain what kinds of sensation that porn specifically works on as a body genre. I think they make that pretty clear on their own. Body genre, then, becomes an essential way of understanding the fantasy that heterosexual porn often attempts to produce, and becomes the basis for Williams' analysis from a feminist perspective. Not necessarily a positive or negative one, but a non-normative theory of porn, one that is explicitly in opposition to ideas of gaze or identification that is common in popular discussions of porn. Even when the pleasure of viewing has traditionally been constructed for masculine specters, as is the case for most traditional heterosexual pornography, it is the female body in the grips of an out-of-control ecstasy that is offered the most sensational sight. So the bodies of women have tended to function as both the moved and the moving. The success of these genres is often measured by the degree by which the audience sensation mimics what is seen on the screen. And this is the major sin that Bat Pussy has committed as a failed piece of pornography. For most of the audience, male or female, young or old, will not achieve the arousal they seek. The vast majority of porn may be terrible from any real filmmaking measure, but it does not fail at this essential aspect. So we need to move away from how we might criticize a typical film, and think more about the more subjective emotional reactions we have. The question isn't, why is Bat Pussy so bad, but why is Bat Pussy unsexy? One major reason, perhaps the major reason, is that the actors are, by my measure, not the most conventionally attractive bunch. There is a very particular body type that we tend to see in porn, and popular film in general, and these are not the bodies that we see in this film. The other reason is a lack of erotic fantasy. The improvisation that they give, a couple arguing while seemingly indifferent to the actual act of sex, or any kind of desire, is not sexually compelling to most people. Combined, it just doesn't arouse. The aesthetic quality of the erotic film entirely relies on our very real social understandings of sex, as opposed to any formal measure. And that understanding of sex is one riddled with issues. Perhaps misunderstanding of sex is a better way to say it. The idea of which bodies are considered attractive or not is well worn, as body standards are set in place and directly affect our own attractions to each other. It is also a problem of heterosexual sex, where there is a vast difference between the amounts of sexual pleasure that both men and women experience, on a population level at least. And to Williams, where the fantasy involves the man overcoming the lack of desire from a woman through his own sexual prowess. That these solutions to the problems of sex are most often constructed from the dominant power knowledge of male subjectivity should come as no surprise. What may surprise, however, is the extent to which sexual difference itself, together with its corollary of unequal male and female centers of power and pleasure, has moved to the foreground of hardcore generic expectation. Hardcore narrative offers a materialism of different varieties, quantities, and quantities of sexual pleasure as the utopian solution to all sexual ills, including the most fundamental ill, the lack of sexual accommodation between men and women. Porn, as a body genre, then, produces feelings and sensations that play a social role, and relying on the reproduction of emotion does not just apply to pornography. Williams also includes both horror and melodramas as other examples of body genres. Horror, as a genre, is meant to inspire fear, and melodrama is meant to inspire sadness, just as porn is meant to inspire arousal. And when they fail, they become a bad movie. This is why so many of these so bad it's good variety of films belong to the other body genres of horror and melodrama. Manos is a failed horror film, and The Room is a failed melodrama. Watching The Room with laughter requires us to reject the tragedy it's attempting to create, to see Tommy Wiseau and his character not as someone deserving of compassion, but as a person to be mocked. To do the same with Manos, we must do the opposite, and see the villains not as horrific, but as unthreatening. They all require some degree of emotional engagement counter to their genre. And as the rules of these genres become entrenched into the filmmaking system, and as art becomes less and less experimental, these genre conventions become stronger than ever. And I think that's a shame. Bat Pussy may be a bad movie, but I love that there are movies like it. And I wish that our filmmaking culture had the room for these experiments, even if they end up being bad. A bad movie is never simply a bad movie. It is an object of culture that we define as good or bad together, based on our responses to it. The review, as a literary form, is a place where these feelings are justified post hoc, and then shared with the public. But true understanding requires diving deeper than following the supposed rules of art. It requires artistic vigilantism, the hero that art deserves, but not the one that it needs right now. So we must remove the mask of Bat Pussy and unveil the Dora Dildo that lies beneath.